Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can view my screen as well. Is my screen visible for you, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just wait one more minute if any other participants wanted to join. Okay, we will start the session of fifth module. Okay, so today we are going to discuss the fifth module in fundamentals of training session. That is the test management. Okay, so here when we begin the session, we will have some topics which we have already discussed on module 1. Some of the brief areas we will cover it up here also. So with that, let me move on to the session. Okay, so first we start with discussing about test planning. Okay, if you remember, we have discussed about this in a brief during our session in module 1, okay, where we learned about different test processes starting from test planning, uh, test analysis, test design till test completion stage. Okay, there was one phase where we initially started off with this test planning. Okay, so any one of you can recollect and tell me like what we discussed in test planning. What is actually test plan document? Who prepares it? What is the content? Can anyone give some points for that? Yes, please. You can unmute yourself or put a response in chat. Yes, Anita. Any points from your side on test plan? Anita, are you there? Anyone else? Please make this session interactive.
Which make define the objectives of testing.
Okay. Yes, that is correct. Any other response, please? Arya, Anita, you are on mute. Please unmute yourself and speak. Maria.
Test plan contains detailed information regarding what to test, scope, objectives, schedule, deliverables.
That is correct. Okay, the same thing we are again discussing here just briefly. Okay, the bullet points you can just refer there. What is the purpose of test plan? So we have discussed like test plan is like the Bible of a tester, where everything related to whatever is going to happen in your testing phase that we document in test plan. That is all the test objectives, the scheduling, resourcing, budgeting, what all environments you are uh, going to use, what levels of testing you are going to do. Everything regarding the testing activities will be documented in a test plan. And what will be the purpose of this test plan? It is like anyone who joins the team can refer this as a means of communication. Okay, or he can refer this what all things are going on in the project, especially in the testing related stuffs. Okay, and it's a documented form of where We can see all the objectives of testing, what all activities, test activities are performed. So those things is documented in the test plan. Okay. And the fourth bullet point is demonstrate that testing will adhere to existing test policy and test strategy, or how it deviates from them. Okay, test policy, test strategy. Is anyone familiar with that term? Test strategy. What is test strategy?
Automation or manual, that's testing technique that will be performing.
Yeah. So test strategy and test policy are two documents. Okay. So what I can describe is like in the design phase, if you may have heard about a high level design document and a low level design document, right? HLD and LLD, where the developers used to prepare. So similar thing, you can refer these documents like test policy and test strategy, similar to a high level design and a low level design document, where test policy can be related to a high level design document. Like it will be kind of a very, very brief overview, which we can produce to the organizational level stakeholders. Like it will only give a high level idea of what is going to happen. Nothing in detail will be there. Similar to a high level design document. But if you see a low level design document, how it will be break down, the main tables will be break down into sub tables, what all collections you are going to use, everything will be described there in details, right? In a low level. Similarly, in a test strategy will be kind of a document which gives an elaborative view of whatever is mentioned in the test policy. So test policy is very, very high level, which we produce at the organizational level. Test strategy will be at the project level, where it gives more details. Okay, what all? Suppose usually in projects they have a separate automation test strategy document, separate functional test strategy document. If it has performance testing has a separate test strategy. Like what is they are going to achieve during the testing phase, what all tools they are going to use, where is the test plan prepared, all those things will be mentioned in the strategy or a test policy document. Okay, that's the difference. Like one is high level, one is a very detailed one. And as mentioned in multiple discussions, like planning, that document itself is a guide for the testers or a Bible for the testers, and gives all the schedules, people's tools, cost, effort, the risks associated. All those things will be part of the test plan. So I'm just overviewing whatever we are discussed in previous session also, so that you will get a more idea on whatever we discussed, and they are mentioning it as some bullet points, so that you can read through it and remember these points. Okay. So what will happen is the ISTQB papers, this will be given as options for you to pick up, like what is part of test plan, or what is the purpose. They'll give us some bullet point on, I mean, in the options, they will include some of the correct options that is given here, and also some wrong ones will be mixed up. Okay. So whatever we discuss now, again, you can go through that. What is the content of test plan? What are we discussed? Scope, objectives, test basis. What is test basis? Source of information for you. That is in agile perspective, your user stories, and in traditional model, we used to call it as requirements or the specification document. That is main in that all we can keep it at one umbrella, like context of testing. Okay, which includes scope, test objectives, constraints, test basis, everything. Then assumptions and constraints of test project. Okay, for any project that we are working on, we'll start the project with some assumptions, right? Like the test environment will be available by the time we are going to start testing. The configurations will be ready. Some assumption, the PBIs or the user stories which are going to be testable will be ready for testing with the basic criteria fulfilled. That are the basic assumptions we have, right? So those assumptions will be documented in test plan. Stakeholders, like what is each member's roles, responsibilities, everything in the project, that will be documented. That's one of the content of test plan. Then communication, like how frequently we are going to give the reports and everything to the stakeholders or to other members. Like what is the frequency of communication, how often, what all reports we are going to produce. That all is mentioned in the test plan. Risk register. If you remember in the first module, we have talked about this risk register. We'll study in detail in this module about what is a product risk and what is a project risk. Okay, for now, you can keep it as what all risks are associated with the project. That will be also documented in the test plan. Then the test approach. What is test approach? Like what all are the testing techniques that you are going to use? What are the test types? Like is unit testing available? Is any other non-functional testing is relevant for this project? All those things, like is integration testing to be there? So all those test levels, test types, test techniques, exit criteria, entry criteria, everything will be documented as part of test plan. All those we can call it as test approach. Then obviously the budgeting and the schedule of each resources and what all schedules we are going to plan each type of testing. Maybe regression testing we are going to do just before our release. Okay, that's one schedule that will give it in the test plan. Okay, any doubts in any of these topics? This is already we discussed it, but just iterating through that since it is mentioned in the syllabus. Okay, since we already discussed this, I'm just going through that. Okay, next is another new topic which is introduced in the syllabus, that is testers' contribution to iteration and release planning. So what is iteration planning? What is release planning? That we have to understand first before going to understand what is the tester's contribution. So this is something you have to relate to the agile scrum framework or agile method of working. Okay. So before giving the details, I will show you this figure to better understand what is release planning and what is iteration planning. If you remember, I mentioned what is a sprint, a short duration where we pick up some user stories and deliver. Okay, that is called as a sprint. That we can also call it as an iteration. In that particular iteration, maybe we will be working on some 5 user stories. That is called as one sprint. So what is release planning is, you consider it as a roadmap for your project. Like after how many iterations or after how many sprints you are going to deliver a release to the production environment. Okay, we will have a roadmap, right? Maybe release one of the project will happen. This will be fixed. Okay, when we start the project itself, all this roadmap will be already in place. Maybe after 4 sprints, I am going to give a release one of the product. Okay. Next, once the release one is done, again after 4 sprints, I am going to give the release 2. Okay, that you can vision the product in a release point of view, like after how many iterations or after how many sprints you are going to give the release. Okay, that roadmap planning, that you can relate it to release planning. That is what is mentioned in the figure also. If you see the figure, see what is release planning meeting, or the release plan is the number of iterations that you are going to plan for a particular release. You consider as a roadmap for your project. That is release plan. Have you understood the concept? What is release planning?
So, ma'am, during the first iteration, we just produce one build only. That
not build, it will be a working product.
Working
A
product.
short form of your release one.
So, in each of the iteration, we will be creating that what's build. What is the name that we do?
Working product.
Working product.
Working product. After every iteration, we will be having something to demo to the customer. It will not be the end product, but a version of it, which will be in a form of a working element.
Okay, so after the 7th iteration only, we will be releasing that to public
production. Yes, that is correct. Okay, that here in the figure it is mentioned like after 7 iterations you are going to have that release one. Similarly, when you start the project itself, you will have a higher roadmap, like release 1, release 2, release 3, release 4. After I mean at least 6 to 7 releases, they will already have the plan in place. That is called as a release plan. And how many what is this release planning meeting is like? They are going to decide, okay, after maybe in this case, what is shown in the figures, after 7 iterations, I'm going to give the release one, and for that release one, what all features, or at a epic level, higher level, what all features you are going to deliver. Then they will split it up into smaller user stories and take it for each iteration. That is what is called as the iteration plan. I will show the figure for you to understand. See, this is the iteration planning. So if you remember release iteration 1 to 7, the first figure you can relate in the same way. Okay, that is for together for one release. And in one release, there will be multiple iterations. You take one iteration out of that. That is given in the second row. That is out of that 3 iterations given in the figure, one iteration itself is taken. And inside each iteration, there will be different user stories or PBIs or requirements that is being written. Okay. And each story, suppose one PBI is or one user story or one requirement is taken for the sprint, means you divide it into subtasks. Like one functionally testable story, you can create subtask under it, like, okay, this is test design. This is maybe this user story has a front end work and also a back end work is there. So what developers do, a front end guy will create one task for him, like front end development work. Second, back end development. During that time, QA will create a task, test design, test execution, like that. So that each iteration, whatever we are going to do and splitting it into smaller subtasks under it, we call it as iteration planning, because we are doing the planning for a particular iteration. And release is all about multiple iterations. After how many iterations we are going to deliver the product, that is called as a release plan. Is it clear? First of all, you want to understand what is iteration and release. Then only you can understand what is tester's contribution there. Okay, just remember these figures. Keep these figures in mind. It is well and good enough for you to remember the concept. Now let's go to the topic. Okay, tester's contribution to iteration and release plan. So as discussed, there are two types of planning. One is release and another is iteration planning. So as mentioned in that figure, remember that release planning figure in your mind. Now read through the second point, then it will be clear. Release planning looks ahead to the release of a product, redefines the product backlog, that is PBIs. May involve refining larger user stories into smaller set of user stories. So while we are deciding, okay, my release one consists of 7 iterations. Okay, and maybe in the release one, I will include these features. Maybe I will include a prototype of this product and maybe a UI design, something else also. Okay, then I will refine that after discussion. Sorry. After discussions with the team during Scrum meetings and grooming sessions, I will discuss with the team and refine it. I break it the larger user stories into smaller ones. It also serves as basis of test approach and test plan across all iterations. Obviously, right? That is what we told. What is test basis? All the user stories, PBIs, everything will be test basis for you to derive your test plan, like to design your test cases. That will be your test basis. Okay, how does testers involve in this release planning? Do you think only the BA or the product owner or the development team has a role here? No, in Agile it is no. In Agile, every phase tester is involved. So what is his activities in release planning is he participate in writing testable user stories and acceptance criteria. It doesn't mean that he is writing the user story. No. In some projects, even the testers itself write the user story. Actually, it's saying it is the role of the BA or the product owner to write the user story for you. But testers can involve in that discussion and contribute to framing the acceptance criteria for the user story. Okay. Always he is involved in risk analysis also, like quality risk or project risk, anything he can involve in those discussions. Estimating the test effort associated with user stories. That I think those who are already working in Agile will already have an experience on that. Whenever we are doing sprint planning, even testers are involved. We used to give estimates to the user stories on a high level. On a high level, in the sense where we'll take one user story and decide, okay, what will be the size of this user story. So there, even the effort is given by the testers also, considering how much effort will be required for testing of that user story. Okay. So this is the figure which I showed you for release planning. Okay. So now what is iteration planning? Remember that figure. Iteration planning looks at the end of single iteration and is concerned with iteration backlog. So similar to, you can think of sprint planning. So before each iteration or the sprint starts, we have a sprint plan. So it looks ahead for in each iteration or in each sprint, what all things we are going to take it. That is called as the sprint backlog or the iteration backlog. So what is tester's role here? He actually participate in detailed risk analysis of stories. Almost his contribution to release and iteration planning is almost similar, but more detailed analysis is performed in iteration planning rather than release planning. Determine the testability of user stories. Break down user stories into tasks. Okay, that is shown in that figure already. So if you are given a user story, you will write down subtask under it. So ask QA, what are the tasks you will usually create? Maybe a test design task, test execution task. If you are an automation tester, maybe you will create a task like, okay, first you have to analyze whether test automation is feasible for that. Then you have to write the scripting, then execution of the automation script. So those kind of subtasks you can add. First of all, you will determine whether the user story is testable. Okay, that all things testers use to determine in iteration planning. Identify the functional and non-functional aspect of test object. Definitely, right? So suppose performance aspects also need to be considered. He will analyze that and report it. Maybe there is another performance testing team in the project. So he will communicate those to that particular team. Okay. Then effort estimation is all there for both, iteration as well as release planning. Whatever efforts he has to spend, that effort estimation will be definitely there. So these are the role of the tester in iteration. So this is the figure for iteration plan. So when you come to iteration and release planning, if you read through, almost the contribution of tester is similar there, but one is detailed analysis, another is kind of a high level analysis, or efforts is there. And he used to give the estimates to both iteration and release planning, but one is at a higher level, but the other one is like breaking down into task and giving the detailed analysis. All those things happens in iteration or the sprint planning. Is it clear? Any doubts in iteration and release planning? It's all completely related to the agile framework, agile way of working. If no doubts, I will move. Okay. So next is entry criteria and exit criteria. This is an important topic. In any ISTQB paper, you can see one question from this area. Okay. Entry criteria, or always you consider the definition of ready, and exit criteria is definition of run. Sorry, definition of done. Okay, one is definition of ready, another is definition of done. So entry criteria means what all things should be ready for you to actually start with the execution. That all things you can consider as entry criteria. But once the execution is done, and how we are considering, okay, my testing is done, everything looks good. That is called as exit criteria or definition of done, as the name suggests. Okay, having that points in your mind, just try to analyze the points given here. That is, entry criteria is now you have to start your execution. What all things should be available for you? Availability of resources like people, tool, environment, the test data for your testing, budget, time, everything should be available for you. So those things can be considered as an entry criteria. Availability of testware. What is this testware? Like you should have a user story or a requirement. Your test cases should be ready. Then only you can go and execute that, right? Then at least the smoke test should be passed. Okay. So these all things you can consider as entry criteria. Like example, like your test environment setup, test plan that you have prepared should be approved. Test data should be available. Suppose you have automation scope in your project, those test scripts should be ready. The tool configuration, licensing, everything should be ready in order for you to execute. Those all things will come under entry criteria. Then what will come under exit criteria? As I mentioned, now you have executed everything. Then you have to ensure that, okay, my testing is done and everything looks good. So what all things to consider here? Measureness of thoroughness. Like for any project that you are working on, there will be defined criteria or benchmarks set for your project, right? Like example, the total number of failed cases should be within a limit. I should have a test coverage of at least this many, at least 60% of above or above, I should have a test coverage. Like that benchmark will be set for any project. Have I achieved it or not? That is called as the exit criteria. That is called as measurement of thoroughness. And then completion criteria, like maybe you have planned around 1,000 test cases for your execution, but after my execution run is done, have I executed all my planned test cases? And all the defects that are reported, have it been addressed? Have it been fixed? All those will come under completion criteria. Running out of time or budget, like some budget, when we start the testing itself, there'll be a defined schedule and time allocated for us, right? So are we able to finish within that timelines given? That is another exit criteria. So if we take, more than the time limit and we are using more budget and time means, then it will not be considered as an exit criteria. So that is what it's called as definition of done. You have executed everything, but have you satisfied the required completion criteria or the thoroughness or the benchmark set for your project? That comes under exit criteria. So example, like test case execution, the defects that as reported had been resolved, the test coverage is within the agreed limits, is it ready for the release? That is called as the release readiness. All those comes under exit criteria. So all the availability things will come under entry criteria, and all the done items like the benchmarks that have been achieved or not, all those things will come under definition of done. Definitely there will be one question from this area. Mainly like the questions will be asked like they will give some examples in the options and ask you to categorize it between exit criteria and entry criteria. So only one thing you have to remember, what should be ready in order for you to start your execution? That should come under entry. And after your execution is done, what all things should be satisfied to consider for you, like okay, I am done with my testing, that will come under exit criteria. Any doubts in this? I hope like in all of your projects there will be some entry and exit criteria for you to actually start the testing and stop the testing. That is called as entry and exit. Is it clear? Can I get some response, please? Devi Krishna, is it clear for you? I just need some response to understand, like, are you following or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Namita, Kartika. Okay. Everyone says yes. Okay. Let me proceed. Now, estimation techniques. Okay. So, in one of our previous slides, we told about estimation, right? Even a tester's role in iteration and release planning. When we start a sprint, we estimate the user stories. So, basically, in Agile, we have different estimation techniques available. So, we will have a discussion of a couple of items in this ISTQB paper as well. So, we'll start with estimation based on ratios. Okay. This is called as a metric based technique. Okay, something related to like calculations and some logics are happening behind. That is why it is called as metric based. It's also called ratio analysis or comparative estimation. That is basically you will be having any historical data or some benchmarks in order for you to predict the future estimates. Okay, the similar projects or similar domain projects, some historical data will be already there with you and you can predict the current estimate for the user stories. That is called as estimation based on ratios. Okay, for you to better understand, I have kept an example. Okay, suppose there's a development project that is given to you. In the previous project, development to test effort ratio is given as 3:2. Okay, and the current project, it is estimated that development effort will be around 600%. And the question is, what will be the test effort? So if you are using this estimation based on ratio, it is just a simple logic. Development effort by test effort for the previous project is given as 3:2. That is 3/2. So from this, Actually, you can predict the future estimate, meaning like development effort for the future project is already given as 600%. So just substituting that in the formula, you will get the test effort to be 600 into 2 by 3, that is 400%. So very, very direct thing. It will be given as a ratio for your previous project, and any one estimate will be already given, either the test or the development. From that, you can find the other effort. Is it clear? It's a simple calculation. Based on historical data, you are predicting the future. So the second technique is also a metric based, meaning like you are doing some calculation or things in to find the estimates or to forecast the future value. So just look at this is also the same thing. Some historical data will be given to you or some past trends will be given to you. You can predict the future from the past trends. Okay, if you see the example given here, there is some sales growth of a product is given in the figures, like year one, $100, $150, year three, $200, year five, you can see $300. So what will be the estimated thing for year 6 if it is there? Just see the pattern and give me the year 5 projection. Sorry, year 6 projection. Just see that growth. What will be in year 6? Yeah, $350. Maria, that is correct. So just very, very simple, right? Based on the past historical data, how it is behaving, you have to predict the future. So this is called as extrapolation. You are extrapolating the value of future from the past trends that is given. Okay, now we have learned ratio based extrapolation. Now going to the most commonly used agile techniques even now in the project, that is wideband Delphi. It is called as expert based technique. So the other two were metric based because they are based on some calculations. Okay. So wideband Delphi is not like that. It is called as expert based because it is the estimates are given based on your experience. Okay, your previous experience in your previous projects or your same domain projects, you are giving the rough estimate for the user stories. Okay, this is the common used agile estimate nowadays in agile scrum methodology. And planning poker is a variant of wideband Delphi commonly used in agile. Okay. So if I want to explain you very, very detailed about planning poker, it will not be possible because we require another class for it. Okay. But I will give you a brief idea how planning poker is going to occur in agile projects. Okay. Because for answering the questions, maybe this info may be required for you. So what will happen is during the sprint planning, when we suppose thing like there are 3 user stories and as a team, Scrum team will get together, like it involves testers, development team, technical architects, BA, everyone will be there. And the Scrum team will be giving the estimate to each user story. Suppose thing like one user story is taken and we are going to estimate that user story as a team. Okay. What will happen is, what is planning poker is, we have actually this online kind of games are available, right? Similarly, we can play this in online mode. Like there'll be cards assigned to each member, or a card can be the scrum master will be driving this all together. So he will assign cards for each participant in the team, like to developers, testers, everyone. He will assign a card. Okay. And based on the Fibonacci series, you know, right? It goes in the a specific pattern. So in that specific pattern or that numbering system we can use, and I can give a point to the user story, and I will not show it to the entire team. I will just keep it hiding. Suppose thing like as a tester in the team, I have given the story point as 8. Okay, another tester in this team gave the same user story point like 8. Maybe another developer gave it 5 and another developer gave it as 8. Okay, so altogether we have 4 cards here. Now what will happen is, after everyone is done with the estimate, the Scrum Master will actually reveal the card to everyone in the team. Okay, so now everyone will see each other's points. Now we will see like who has given the higher point, who has given the lower point, and we will discuss among the team why the maybe the developer gave 5 points, why he gave the 5. Then the higher points will take. So all the testers gave 8, another developer also gave 8. Okay. So he will explain like why he gave a 8. So maybe he will explain like, okay, I have considered, I thought like for testing I have to test so many complex scenarios here, so I gave a 8. Okay, then the whole team has to agree to a common point, then only we will finalize the point. It is not like one just said it, we'll approve it. No. We'll first discuss among the team and understand like why the one gave lower points and why the other person gave the higher points. And as a team, we have to agree to a common point and we will go for another round. Okay, next once we understand okay why I gave that point, then again another round of planning poker we will play. Planning poker in the sense, and I mean another round we will give the card. Again we will people will give the estimate. Then the scrum master will reveal the card. Then see like have we agreed at the common point 8. If not, again we will discuss among the team. Another round of planning poker will go. That is how planning poker estimation will work. Have you understood this? So if you're interested in knowing more about this, just try to Google this about how planning poker occurs in Agile. Okay, this explanation is not given in your ISTQB, but just for your understanding, if any questions come out of this, you can just keep this method in mind. This is called as wideband Delphi. Okay, now we have learned a ratio-based extrapolation, wideband Delphi. Now coming to the, I think this is the last one. Yes. So another one more is expert based. Okay, this is also called expert based, even though it involves some calculations because this estimates, right, whatever we are giving is also kind of based on our experience we are giving. We call it as 3-point estimation, and there's a formula for final estimate which you have to learn, that is E equal to A plus 4M plus B by 6, and standard deviation SD is B minus A by 6. And what is this M? What is this A, B? A is called as most optimistic estimation. M is called most likely estimation and B is called most pessimistic estimation. These three are the names. We just go through that and how we have to just give this values in the formula and find the final estimate. So this formula you have to learn, and what all are the each terms also you have to learn. Most optimistic is A, M is most likely estimation, and B is most pessimistic estimation. So I have kept an example for you to better understand. So here there's a question given. Best case scenario is given, worst case scenario is given, and most likely scenario is given. You have to apply the 3-point estimation and find the final estimate of the time needed to execute the 4 test cases. So here, if you the first sentence states, team wants to estimate the time needed for one tester to execute 4 test cases for a software, and the data is given for you. You have to find the final estimate using 3-point estimation. So you know the formula, E is equal to A plus 4. So now how you take this A, M and B is the question. So most optimistic estimate A, that is the best case scenario you have to consider as most optimistic. Whatever is given as best case scenario, that is given in the question as 1 hour. Most likely is most likely scenario, that is 3 hours. It's already given in the question. And pessimistic estimate means the worst case scenario. So most optimistic means best case, the other one means worst case. All these values are directly given in the question. What you have to do is directly apply these values in the formula. So you will get us 3.5 hours. So the question here is, just go through the question once. Final estimate of the time needed to execute or 4 test cases. So this estimate is actually to execute 1 test case, that is 3.5 hours. So if to execute 4 test cases, you have to multiply this with 4. That means 14 hours will be the answer for you. So just only the direct values will be given in the question. You have to map it to optimistic, best, most optimistic and most pessimistic. That is best case and worst case. You have to just map this values. That's the only thing you need to do. Rest you can directly substitute in the formula and get the answer. Okay, this is called as 3-point estimation. Okay, so what all estimations we have gone through? One is based on ratios, then extrapolation, wideband Delphi, which I explained the method planning Parker, and the 3-point estimation. So one question you can expect will be direct question, not very complex question. Directly you can apply this in the formula. Okay. Any doubts on this? Any points you want to discuss one more time? Can we proceed? Okay, thanks, Maria. Thanks for your response. Okay, now we move to the next topic, test case prioritization. Okay, there are different types of prioritization, how we can prioritize the test case. First one is called risk-based prioritization. As the name suggests, based on the risk of that test or based on the risk of that item, we can give it as higher priority or lower priority. So I'll let you know with an example. So example like when you may be using the shopping sites, right? So there'll be some offer days coming like Black Friday or some offer times will be there for any site, right? E-commerce website. So during that time there'll be high traffic volume during that peak times, correct? So there'll be high chances of leading the website to performance issue or loading issues. It may crash. If you're using an app, there'll be app crashes happening. Those kind of risk items will be there, right? So you have to consider that risk items, those test cases to be prioritized over the other test cases. So based on the risk of that item, you have to give more priority or weightage to the test case. That is called as risk-based prioritization. Another prioritization is coverage-based prioritization. Here also, as the name suggests, suppose you have a test case which cover your 4 requirements. Okay, you have another test case which cover only 2 requirements. Okay, so which you have to prioritize first. Though that test case which have more number of requirements covered, that should be given higher priority compared to the other test case. Like whichever test case cover the higher number of requirements or higher number of statements, that has to be given higher priority. So for example, you have written a test case which covers around 7 user stories or 7 acceptance criteria or 7 statements. Test case 2 covers 4. Test case 3 covers 15 statements. So I am asking you to order it based on coverage-based prioritization, how you can order it. It is T3, T1, T2 because T3 covers around 15 use cases. T1 covers 7 use cases, T2 covers 4 use cases. So according to the coverage-based prioritization, it should be T3, T1, T2. Is it clear what is coverage-based?
And what does this use case means?
Use case means acceptance criteria for you or the requirements. Okay, suppose you have written a test case which covers 7 requirements. That means that test case should be given as higher priority. Requirements or acceptance criteria or what I should say, the validation points for you. Maybe you have written it as an end-to-end test case covering your 5 acceptance criteria that is given. That is what I called it as use case. Any these words are interchangeable, like acceptance criteria or requirements or the bullet points which is given in the PBI for you to validate, right? That is what means by use cases or statements or anything interchangeably you can use. Was it clear? Okay. So next comes requirement-based prioritization. That means requirement-based prioritization focus on prioritizing tasks on activities based on their alignment with the project requirements. Okay. So with an example, I can see, suppose you are working on a banking project. Okay, there is some requirements that is given to you related to the security and the privacy aspects like PIA information, the password protection and the account information. Those are kind of private information, right? So there are some requirements which are given to you, which are security and privacy related requirements, which has to be prioritized due to the compliance issues. Correct? If you are not adhering to that, it is a very considered as not compliant in terms of a banking project. These are all very important requirements for you. Considering the functionality should work fine. But on top of that, this privacy and security aspects are very, very important for a banking domain application. If any one of you are working on that banking domain, you may be knowing it. So that requirement should be given more weightage or more priority than compared to the functional requirements. That is called as requirement based prioritization. So some requirements are given higher priority based on the application you are testing or the domain you are working. Some requirements may be given higher weightage compared to other functional requirements. Okay, that is considered as requirement based prioritization. So everything, that name itself has that what is that functionality of that prioritization. Okay, so we have learned about three types: risk-based, coverage-based, and requirement-based prioritization. Have you understood this? Is it clear? Okay, thanks, Vidya. Now, the next topic is test pyramid. Okay, this you may have seen these figures and this topic maybe in your manual testing classes or in your when you started testing career itself. This will be very familiar to you. What is a testing pyramid? So before going to the explanation, I wanted to show that figure. Okay, having this figure in mind, you can just explain what is a test pyramid. Okay, it's just a diagrammatic view like in the shape of a pyramid where you can represent the low level test, like the component level test. Okay, when you start testing, only some of the components of that application will be available, right? So the lower level test that the developers will do is unit testing. Each unit they are going to test. Then only you will move to integration testing and finally the system testing or end-to-end testing, right? So as we climb up the ladder, we go to higher levels of testing. We start with unit testing, then we go with integration testing, then we go to the system level or the end-to-end testing. So to test an application from scratch or by component base means it is very faster we can do. And it will be very cheaper also because only the units are available. But when we go higher and higher, like for integration testing, you have to integrate all the components and then test it end to end. Also on a higher level, from the system level, you have to test, which means it will be a little bit slower because you have to integrate everything. You have to see the whole functionality. So it will be slower and it will be more expensive. This is what is called as a test pyramid. Now we'll come back to the explanation. So test pyramid is a model that shows different testing have different levels of granularity. That is what I called it as, first layer unit test, then it goes to higher level like end-to-end or integration, those type. Each layer or each pyramid layer represent group of tests. That is what is shown in that figure, right? Higher the layer, lower the granularity, test isolation, test execution time. Means if you want to test the system as a whole, that is system testing or end-to-end testing, it will take more time, right? That is test execution time will be higher there. That is what is mentioned in the third point. Tests in the bottom layer are small and can be executed very fast because it is a very small functionality. You are testing unit by unit. That is why it is called as small or it's fast or it's isolated. Okay, top layer consists of very high level or end-to-end test cases or very complex scenarios you will execute in top layer. That is why the top system testing or end-to-end testing will be more slower than compared to the unit level testing. So higher tests are always slower than the lower levels because there all the functionalities are integrated together and you have to test the system as a whole, not like unit by unit. Okay, That's why we call it as we move higher and higher, or the higher level of test when we wanted to execute, it will take more time and it will be expensive also. Lower layers will be cheaper and takes less time to execute. This is what is called as test pyramid. There will be one question from this test pyramid, but will be a direct question. One second. Yeah, sorry. So test pyramid, is it clear? Just keep this figure in mind, that layer by layer, and more expensive, less expensive. All questions will come, any questions will be coming only from this area, direct questions. Is it clear? Test pyramid? Yes, team, any questions? Okay, I take it as a no. I'm just moving. Next important topic, that is testing quadrants. Okay, this is also, you may have seen this when you started your testing career. There are 4 quadrants which we organize the testing phases. Okay, so to answer any questions that is coming from this testing quadrants, you have to just remember this figure. If you remember this figure, you can answer any questions that is coming from testing quadrants. Okay, this is not there in the syllabus. I have kept it for your easy way of learning. Okay, so just remember there are 4 quadrants. Starting from this goes in this order. Okay, we start with unit test or component test. So what you have to remember is these 4 quadrants, and in each quadrant what all test we are covering, and is it automated or manual. And also you have to remember these 4 phases, like one phase, this phase, this is quadrant 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so quadrant 1 and 4 is technology facing. Quadrant 2 and 3 is business facing. This you have to remember. Also coming to these 2 sides, like 1 and 2. Yeah, any questions? Okay, this 1 and 2, if they are facing the side like supporting the team, and the other side is critiquing the product. These 4 sides you have to remember. Now we'll start with one by one. So first quadrant is the basic level, like the test pyramid where we started, unit test and component test. So if you see in your project, most of the unit tests, we will be having it automated. Okay, that's why this test are showing us automated. Moving to next level, it comes the functionality test or the user story test, or I think in one module you have already learned ATDD, that is acceptance test driven development, prototypes, simulations, the POCs you do, everything will be coming under the quadrant 2. And it can be either automated or manual. Okay. The third quadrant comes your UAT testing, like the alpha, beta testing. This all I hope like you have learned in the other modules. Exploratory testing also, there was one topic in one of the modules. What is exploratory testing and all those things. Usability testing, UAT, alpha, beta testing, everything comes in the third quadrant, and it is all manual. Okay. So coming to your fourth quadrant, it is your non-functional test, meaning like your performance, load testing, security testing, all those comes under fourth quadrant, and it will be all related to tools. Some tools will be used there. If you take load testing, there will be tools like load runner. Performance testing, we have other tools to perform it. So that is why we have associated it with tools. So just remember this figure along with this bubbles at the end, whether it is automated, manual, and these 4 phases. Then you are ready to answer any questions that is coming from this module. And definitely there will be 1 or 2 questions from quadrants, which you can easily get it. Just remember this figure. Okay. So now I hope like you have got all those quadrants and all. Now let's see what ISTQB is telling about each quadrant. Okay, quadrant 1. As I mentioned, it is technology facing. That is why I have kept this figure first for you to understand. What is this quadrant consist of? Component or the unit test. This can be automated and included in CI process. What is the CI? I hope like you know CI/CD process. You don't know need to know this in detail. Just keep these terms in mind. That what are you doing in unit testing? You are testing each unit or method individually, correct? Whether it is working as expected, and the interactions between different subsystems or modules. Okay, this all it is covered in this figure itself. You see what is its what does this quadrant 1 covers? Unit and component test. It is technology facing. So that is why you have to keep this figure in mind to go through the points. So quadrant 2, it's business facing. It consists of functionality tests, user story, prototypes, APIs, simulations, acceptance criteria. It can be manual or automated. Everything is there in the figure. See, functionality, story test, prototype, simulations, everything will come under quadrant 2. The same figure, it's explained in words here. If you come to quadrant 3 is where, see, this is quadrant 3. It is business facing and also critiquing the product. That's what is mentioned as quadrant 3, business facing, critiquing the product. Contains exploratory, usability, user acceptance, all those testing. It is used to uncover the defects, identify risk, explore different usage scenarios, which you know, right? UAT testing, what is it done? It tests the system from the user perspective or from the usage scenarios. That is what just mentioned in the words here. Quadrant 4, which is the non-functional test. And it is technology facing and critiquing the product, which includes your load test, performance test, security test, compatibility test. All those non-functional tests will be included as part of quadrant 4. So everything is there in the figure, just they have mentioned it in different sentences. So just keep this figure in mind and go through the points. Okay. Are you familiar? Okay, are you good to move on? You learned this figure. Okay, can we proceed? Yes, team, can you respond, please? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Arya. Okay, now we are moving to the next topic, that's the risk management. Okay. So if you remember in in the test plan also we have mentioned there's a risk register concept, right? Where we include all the project and product risk. There I mentioned we learn in detail about risk. Okay. So what is a risk? Any unusual or any accidental thing that is going to happen in the project relating to your functionality or something, any risk that is associated with the product. Okay, so there we have two terms to learn basically. One is risk analysis and what is risk control. Risk analysis means now you have identified a risk, you have to analyze it. Okay, so risk analysis basically consists of two sub parts, that is risk identification and risk assessment. And once the risk is identified and it is assessed, we have to take measures to actually control the risk, correct? Which involves two processes, that is risk mitigation and risk monitoring. So basically risk management consists of risk analysis plus control. Analysis involves identification and assessment, and control involves how to mitigate the risk and how you can monitor the risk, correct? And the test approach in which test activities are selected, prioritized, and managed based on risk analysis and control is called risk-based testing. So in simple terms, what is meant by risk-based testing is whatever you are testing, whatever product you are testing, you will actually identify what are the risky scenarios for you, and you will plan some test cases to execute around your risky scenarios. That is called as risk-based testing. Okay. You have to identify the risk and you have to plan some test cases around your risky scenarios. That is called as risk-based testing. Now let's see in detail about what is a risk, and what are the factors influencing it. So what is actually a risk? An uncertain event or condition that occurs that can have positive or negative effect on a objective, project's objective. Like it's very uncertain event that occurs that can cause either a positive or a negative impact on your product. Okay, there are two factors which can be considered here. One is risk likelihood and another is risk impact. Risk impact is called as harm. What is likelihood? As the name suggests, how often this risk occurs or what is the probability of occurrence of this risk? That is called as likelihood. We can categorize it as like less likely or it is unlikely. We have different probable levels like unlikely to occur, medium probability, high probability, like that we can categorize. It is always a value which is greater than 0 and less than 1. Risk likelihood. And what is the consequence of that risk? What is going to happen if that risk has occurred in our particular product? What that consequence is called as the risk impact or risk harm. Have you understood what is likelihood and what is impact? And what is actually a risk? Yes, team? Have you understood? Are you not following or you have understood it? What is likelihood and what is impact of that risk?
Ma'am, can you repeat it once again?
Yeah, what is actually a risk? Risk means any uncertain event that happens which has a positive or negative impact on your product. Okay, there are
But
two
if it is risk, how can it have a positive impact?
positive impact may be also there in some cases. Okay, we'll come to that with an example. Okay, risk is always an uncertain event, that is sure, but it can have a positive or negative impact on project's objectives, which means when you when you come to the later slides, we will learn in detail about what is actually the different categorization of risk. Okay, there you will come to know like what is actually the positive part of having risk and what is the negative part, because we have different categories of risk available. Okay, so for now, just understand like what is these two factors. Like one is likelihood, which categorize the risk based on the probability of occurrence, like high probable, low probable, or medium probable. And it's always a value greater than 0 and less than 1. And what is the impact of that risk? That is called as the risk impact or harm. If those 2 points are clear for you for now?
Yes.
Likelihood and impact.
Yes.
It is clear, right? Okay. Now, as I mentioned, there are different types of risk. Okay, if you remember in the project planning phase itself, we have learned risk register. We include product risk and project risk. Okay, so everything that is related to the quality of the product, we categorize it as product risk. Anything related to the quality of the product. But anything related to the project aspect, we call it as project risk. So now let's understand what are these different project risk and what are the different product risk. So project risk actually means anything related to the project issues, like any delays caused in the project. For example, there is an organizational issue in the ongoing in the product which delayed the release, or some cost cutting happened which actually delayed the release of the whole project, which is considered as a project risk. Suppose thing like you are starting a new project, okay, with there are a lot of pressures in the project which are not who are not experienced resources, which again they need a transition phase or they may need a training to upskill themselves and to get that transition and start working in the project, right? So there is some transition period required, which may again delay the project. So there is insufficient skills due to which the whole project got delayed. Those kind of people issues, we can consider it as a project. Here, there is nothing related to the quality of the product. So there is something else, some other factors are affecting the project, which actually led to the delay of the project and which can be considered as a risk there. So another issue is like we call it a scope creep. Okay, usually this happens in agile projects like the initial project scope which is defined, right? It will go on changing in between. Some new requirements will be added, some things will be modified so that we require more resources that time, maybe budget will be required more. This is called as a scope creep. That is called as technical issues. Again, the scope creep happens means like additions, removals in the project happens means again it will delay the whole project, right? The budgeting, the scheduling that we already kept in, that will have a change here and there, which is called as the technical issues, which is again categorized under project issues. Suppose thing like you are actually working on a hardware product, okay, and there is some hardware items which is supplied from a third party vendor. Okay, thing like the delivery of that component part didn't happen on time, which affected your project, and or the whole deliverable got delayed, due to which you cannot integrate the component and test it in the system testing. Okay, so that delay in the supply of that particular deliverable delayed the whole project, correct? Which is called as the supplier issues. And again, it is a delay in the project, not in the quality of the deliverable, which is again categorized into the project risk. So what all things are considered as project risk? So how the questions comes from here is they will give in the options, different options they will give it. Them correctly. Okay, so everything that is not related to the quality of the product and is delaying your project, which means it will be considered as a project issue, like organizational, people, technical, supplier issues. All those things will be considered as part of project. But as I mentioned, everything that is related to the quality of the product, that is considered as your product risk. So I'll give you an example. If you remember, there was a Nokia Android release of a Android release happened long time ago. Okay, that time it went into a failure, and what was the reason for it? The users reported it like it was not user friendly as the other products. Okay, this is a classic example of product risk, because the user friendliness of that particular product was not thoroughly tested, which again resulted in the quality issues, and again the product got, it was not successful in the market. This is actually a product risk which was not identified before. So, which is actually an issue with the quality of the product itself, like user dissatisfaction, and due to which we had an impact on our revenue, or some damage happened. Okay, these kind of things we can consider as product risk. And suppose if that product was a healthcare product, thing like it was a healthcare product, so if it does not work properly in the intended environment, means what will happen? It can even cause a physical damage, or injuries can be caused, right? Think like it was a medical some product which was used like a glucose meter or something like that, which resulted in incorrect results, which means it is not delivering that quality whatever is expected, correct? And which may lead to injuries or even death. And in such cases, it may lead to penalties also, criminal penalties also it may lead to. So this kind of issues, we can categorize it as a product risk, or the damage that has been happened. Anything that affecting the quality of the product, we call it as product risk. Got it? So what will happen? In the questions, how will they ask is they will give some examples, or else this direct bullet points which is given here, right? This scope creep, these terms will be given in the options for you, and you have to pick up and categorize to what category it comes up, like whether it comes under project risk or it comes under product risk. Is it clear? Product and project risk, is it clear? Definitely there will be one question from this project and product risk. This was also a topic in the previous version of the syllabus. Is it clear, team? Product and project risk, is it clear? Okay, some response. Okay, Maria, oh, thank you. Yes. Okay, Arya, thank you. Thanks for your response. So here, okay, if you remember, we started with discussing about what is a risk, and there we learned about two terms: risk likelihood and risk impact. Likelihood is the probability of occurrence of that risk, and impact is the consequence of that risk. Okay, coming back to that points. Product risk analysis consists of risk identification and assessment, and risk control consists of mitigation. I'll just go back to that point. See, risk management consists of 2 points: analysis and control. Analysis consists of identification and assessment. Control consists of mitigation and monitoring. This is what is referenced here also. Analysis consists the first part, that is risk identification and assessment. So first we have to identify what is the risk and we have to assess. Okay, that are the two parts in the initial part. So what is this risk identification? What is this risk identification? So we have to identify, first we have to identify, suppose when we are starting the testing of a product or a software project or a hardware domain project, we have to first identify what may be the risk associated with the product. How we can identify those things? Maybe we have to get together as a team and we have to brainstorm, do some workshops, do some idea exchanges between us to discuss about the product and what can be the probable risky areas of the product. Okay, that we can identify through some workshops or brainstorming discussions. We can identify the risk. So once the risk is identified, we have to assess it. Okay, what is the likelihood of occurrence or the impact of that risk? We have to assess it. So these are the initial steps that we do in a risk-based testing. First, we have to identify the risk. Next, we have to assess like what is the impact, what is the likelihood. And the assessment part, right? This part, risk assessment part, where we assess what is the likelihood and what is the impact of that risk. It consists of both a quantitative and a qualitative approach. So what does this quantitative means? Quantitative means we are actually quantifying it or making it as a measurable figure, or else we can qualitatively assess it, making like rather than a numerical data, we have to just give a subjective judgment there. So how we can quantitatively quantitatively assess the risk is there are various techniques available. Like these are the examples given, but you don't need to go into the details of how the risk priority number or the EMV, expected monetary value, those things are calculated. You don't need to go into the details, but these are the methods which are available to quantify the risk. Okay, I will tell you a simple example. If you consider risk priority number, suppose thing like during the brainstorming discussion, you have identified around 5 risks that is associated with your product. Okay, but out of this 5 risks, you want to assess like which will be of higher priority. So now you will see, okay, I will categorize this 5 risks. Out of this 5 risks, which will be my higher priority one. So now thing like you have identified the third risk may be the higher priority one. So you will I will give a number like RPN1, which means risk priority number 1 is my third risk. Like that, I can assign numbers based on the priority of that risk. That is called as the quantitative assessment, because I am just giving a metric value associated with that risk. That is called as an example is what I told, like risk priority number. Similarly, you can think like expected monetary value also. You are assessing that and associating a numerical value with that risk. That is called as quantitative assessment. And what is qualitative? You will not be assessing anything like a number or metric based. You will not be assigning anything, but you will be qualitatively measuring like, okay, this may be a risk which I have to give higher priority compared to the other risk that is there in the system. Okay, so when I am analyzing all this risk, okay, when I am doing the risk analysis, what are these results used for? After analyzing, what can I use these results for? To determine the scope of testing, what all test types I have to use, what all test levels, like so I have identified a particular risk. Okay, then I am seeing like, okay, to address this, maybe I have to employ a particular test technique there, or I have to use a boundary value there, or I have to use an equivalence partition there to cover all my possible scenarios and to mitigate the risk. Okay, that is how these results can be used basically to identify what all test types, test levels, what will be the effort required to actually execute each task. Then, the critical, we told like the quantitative analysis, like higher risk or the high priority risk should be given higher priority there. Like RPN1, RPN2, like that I can assign the number associated to each risk. Okay. So first of all, I have to take my higher priority risk, or the results can be used like, okay, critical defects, actually I have to prioritize first and try to mitigate them compared to the other risk. So for that, I need that analysis with me, or the results, I can use it to identify what are all the critical defects and which I have to focus first when I start. Okay. Determine whether any activities in addition to testing should be employed. So other than testing, do I have to involve some developer help, or I have to take the help from my DevOps team to actually do some configuration in my environment to control that risk. So any additional thing other than the testing should be there in order to reduce the risk. So all this thing I'll be able to determine with my analysis results. And the second part, what was the first part is identification and assessment, which is what we discussed now. The second part is how I can control. Now I have identified it, and also I have measured like, okay, what is my probability of occurrence, what is the impact, everything I have analyzed. Now how I should control it. So there also we learned two subparts of it. Risk control is mitigation and monitoring. So once the risk is identified, how I can reduce or mitigate or control the risk. Okay. What is mitigation? Risk mitigation is the proactive actions that you take in order to reduce the occurrence. Or you find that, okay, this is a risk which is always going to occur in my product, or this is a very high probable risk. So now how I can reduce that risk? That is actually called as the mitigation that you do. And what is monitoring? As the name suggests, you are going to monitor the ongoing process of tracking, assessing, communicating the changes in the project risk throughout the project life cycle. That is, whatever risk you identified for the product, right? You have to monitor it throughout the project or throughout the life cycle of the project. You have to monitor whether, is the risk is being controlled or is it under control. Like that, you have to go on monitoring this through the entire life cycle of the project. That is called as monitoring, as the name suggests. So mitigation means how you can reduce it, and monitoring means you have to monitor it, track it, assess it, and if there are any changes, you have to communicate it. That process should go on. Okay. Okay. So I'm just reiterating. So products, risk analysis, we have gone through the points like what are the results used for to determine the scope, what all test techniques, what all test levels should be used, effort required to prioritize the critical defects, any additional activities required. Those all things we can determine based on the test analysis. And next we have come across the risk mitigation. What is mitigation and what is risk monitoring? Okay. So now, suppose some project risks are identified. Like what are the project risks we learned? Like supplier issues, technical issues, people issues, like inexperienced members in the team. Like that is those are considered as project issues, right? So now let's discuss through what all things can be used to reduce this type of risk, or how what are the measures that we can take to reduce or mitigate the risk. So one of the issues what we discussed, right? People issues. Okay. So how you can mitigate that particular risk? Suppose in your project, just think from your project aspect. Suppose in your project you are seeing like there are a lot of people issues, like inexperienced members are there, freshers are there in the team. Can you let me know how you will try to mitigate that? How you will try to overcome that in your project? You may have faced
Training.
training, correct. You give required level of training to the project, or you will mix the team with the instead of keeping all the freshers in one team, you will mix up the team with some experienced testers or experienced leads in the team. You will ask them to mentor the junior resources, correct? So that is how, once a risk is identified, you will try to overcome it with some actions. That is called as a mitigation. So in this case, you can either select the testers with the right level of experience and skills, or you can provide trainings, you can assign some mentors to the junior resources. All these things you can do. That is one mitigation. Okay. Or in some cases, we have learned about independent testing, like a separate testing team in the project. Correct? You can involve an independent testing team in the project who is expertised in that particular domain. That's also an mitigation that is possible. Suppose there is a suppose you see that there is some product risk, like the quality of the deliverable is not as per the expected. Okay. In that case, what can be the mitigation actions that you can take to improve the quality? What usually what all process you follow in the project? Suppose thing like after the code development is done, there are a lot of issues with the code. Okay. So that is a risk for you, right? That's a risk in quality, which means it is a product risk. So how you can control it?
Some static analysis tools.
Correct. Yeah. Static analysis, right? Before going to the execution itself, you can do some reviews, like code reviews, or even in test case design phase. After the test case design is done, you can have it reviewed from your test lead or the BA in the team to ensure that you have covered everything in the test cases and you are good with the coverage. Correct? So those review techniques can be one mitigation. Suitable test techniques. Okay, whatever you are going to validate, you should cover the entire scenarios. Like you should apply the boundary value or the equivalence partition to cover the all the combinations that is possible for you in that particular scenario. Okay, employing the correct test types. Okay, suppose you have to integrate it, and test means you have to integrate the things and involve in integration testing also. Not only like unit testing, you have to do. Maybe in some cases you have to even integrate the system and do. And definitely before any release, you should thoroughly conduct the regression testing to ensure that all the new functionalities that you have developed has not affected the earlier functionalities, or the existing functionality should not be impacted. For that, you should actually execute your regression suite to ensure all these things. Okay, these are all the probable control actions or the mitigations that you can do to reduce the project as well as product risk. Okay, there may be other points also coming into your mind in case of your project. That may be also right. Maybe you are following that process, but these are just ISTQB defined things they are suggesting. Okay, this may actually help you to mitigate this type of risk in the project. Okay. So if you remember when we learned about the test process, right? We learned about test planning, monitoring and control, test analysis, design, and different phases you learned, right? So the same thing in the module 5 also, they have extended some of those areas in this module 5 also, and they have kept it as some points there. Okay, the same thing we have learned in module 1. But since they have included it again as part of the syllabus, we have just kept it. But all these things we have learned in module 1 itself, like the monitoring and control. Can anyone tell me the example of a monitoring and control? So many examples we discussed that time. Anyone can recollect any of the example? Can you tell me an example of monitoring and control action? 2, 3 examples we discussed that time to understand what is the monitoring and control activity. Any example do you remember? What is test monitoring and what is test control? No one remembers what is test monitoring? In module 1, we have learned several examples for this. After test planning phase, test monitoring phase happens. What is done in a test monitoring phase? Can anyone recollect this?
Just checking the testing environment, whether it is ready or not.
Okay. That is checking the readiness of the environment and keeping it ready for execution is just happening prior to your execution phase. That is another phase, not in the monitoring and control. That is a test implementation phase where you are making sure everything is ready for your execution. Correct?
Monitoring is a comparison of actual process with the
Correct. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Monitoring the actual progress against what is documented in your test plan. For example, you are planning to execute some testing in any of your environments, and now you monitor the existing progress and find like, okay, this environment is not ready. I have to replan it to another environment or may have to reschedule it to another timing. Okay, that is called as you monitored it and did a replan. That is called as the control action. And another example we discussed is regression testing. So you find like, okay, I'm not possible to execute all these test cases within the regression timeline. So I will execute my P1 and P2 test cases only during that time. That all examples we discussed during that time where we discussed about monitoring and control. Okay, the same example is kept here. Test environment is not available. We reschedule the testing to another environment, say another demo environment. That is a control action. And what is a completion stage? Completion stage is a stage where we produced, after our execution, we produced our reports like the summary report or the lessons learned. All those things we do it in the completion phase. So, why this topic is kept here is they have again reiterated this, but there is no change in the context. Whatever we have learned in the module 1, they have reiterated that again in this module. That is why again it is kept for your impression. Okay, so the next topic is metrics used in testing. This also all of this maybe some of this may be used in your projects. So what all are the quantifiable things that you are producing after your execution phase? That is called as the metrics that you are using in your testing. So can you let me know, suppose thing like you have done with the execution of your test cases. Okay. What all are the reports that you produce in your project to the stakeholders, or the leads may be producing some reports, right? What all are the reports you produce? I just want to know, like.
Burn down chart.
What is that?
Burn down chart.
Burn down chart. Okay. That is in Agile, right? Your meaning?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other reports? Anyone else? After your execution is done, you don't produce any kind of report, at least from maybe from the Jira or something, you will extract something and produce, right?
Yes, summary report.
Test summary report, that is correct. Any other report? After the defects is being logged, do you produce any kind of defect reports?
Bug report.
Bug report, yeah, that is correct. You will include all priority, severity of the bug in that, right? Bug report. Yeah. So these are actually the metrics that you produce after your testing. Okay, now let's see like what ISTQB is saying. So one metric is project progress metric. So as the name suggests, during your testing, this metrics will be produced. Like when you are progressing with the testing, this project progress metrics will be produced, like about the task completion, the resource usage, what are the test efforts. This all will be included in the project progress report. Sorry, project progress metrics. Similarly, there will be test progress metrics where you will be producing like what are number of test cases that is ran, not ran, failed, the execution time, all can be included in the progress metric. This is also produced during the test execution. Then there is product quality metrics. Okay, defect metrics is there. Defect metrics, maybe all of you may be producing. You will be extracting it from the Jira tool or the Azure DevOps tool and producing it. Like there are, so these all terms you don't need to know. This is not there in the syllabus also. The main highlighted this bold mark point, right? This is only mentioned in your syllabus. So for your understanding, like what is this defect matrix, what is your product quality matrix, I have kept this. Okay, there's no need to learn all this. So defect matrix is like for each PBI or each requirement, maybe how many defects you produced. That is called as a defect density or the reopen rate for the defect. That all comes under, if you are producing all this, that all comes under defect matrix. Quality metrics means the mean time to failure, mean time to repair. Okay. So these all metrics will come under product quality metrics. It is not necessary that all these metrics, all of your projects will be producing. I'm sure this quality metrics and all we usually don't produce. Okay. Defect metrics will be there. Okay. Under defect metrics also, I'm not sure whether you'll be producing all this. Defect density, maybe most of you will be producing, but the other things, it is also considered as defect matrix, but may not be like you all are producing it. Risk matrix is there, like involving, the impact, likelihood of the risk. We will produce like a risk metric we can produce, including all the risk of the project. Coverage metrics, like the requirement traceability metrics, those kind of info that you produce, right? That is included in the coverage metrics. Cost metrics is the cost of testing, the organizational cost, all those will be produced in the cost metrics. This all is not a QA activity. Cost metrics and all will be produced from the test manager level or from the PM level. They will be producing this cost metrics and all. It's not from the QA side. So mainly what all metrics is included, you just need to know this name and what is this metrics all about. No need to go in detail like this mean time to repair, all those things. Project progress, test progress, product quality metrics, which includes this MTTR, MTBF, like mean time to failure, repair, all those things. Then defect metrics, risk metrics, coverage metrics, cost metrics. All these metrics is mentioned in the ISTQB that you can produce as part of testing. And so now we have gone through various reports, right? So who do you think, what is the purpose, what is the content, and who are the audience of this report? So as the names, each report has a different content, right? What is produced in a test progress report is not the same in a cost metric. It's not the same in a defect density report, correct? So each report has a different content, different purpose, and the audience also may be depending upon the report. So if you consider a test progress report, which we learned, the first metric that we learned, test progress metric, what will be the content? Content will be how we are progressing in the testing. It is not testing, we are not done with the execution. So we will be just documenting how are we progressing there, and who will be the audience? Definitely the stakeholders will be, or the customers will be the audience there. They have to get the updates on whatever is going on in our testing. So that is why we produce all these metrics. Suppose we take a test completion report, it is produced at the end of your execution. So it gives an overall conclusion about your testing activities. So that is the content of a completion report. And its audience will be also your stakeholders or your test managers, whom will get an idea about, okay, how I have summarized the testing and what is the release readiness of the product. So all those info they will get after seeing this completion report. So that is why I said each report has a different content and purpose is also different, and the audience of the test reports may be also different. Anyway, in all the report, stakeholders will be the common audience there. So here it is defined in detail, like what all this test progress report include. So I mentioned, right? Either it can be produced in daily, after if all day you can produce this test progress. How you are progressed in each day, you can produce this. Weekly also in some projects we will produce this. So what all will be there as part of test progress? Obviously, the test progress will be there. Like, are we ahead of schedule or behind the schedule? The test period, like what is the duration that involves the testing? Impediments of testing and their workarounds. What is this impediments? What do you
Things that can stop you from testing.
Correct. Like some things which actually slow down your testing. Okay, some blockers for you in the environment or in the functionality level. There are some blockers where you can't proceed with, that are called as impediments. And in some impediments you may have a workaround to actually do a workaround and complete it. Okay. Test metrics, new changed risk. What are the risk and changed items during the testing period? What is the test planning for the next period? Those all will be included as part of progress. And what does it cover in a test completion report? Obviously, now you have executed everything and producing the summary. So it will be kind of a test summary you are producing. What all deviations you have made from whatever you have documented in test plan. So everything will be documented in test plan, right? So what are the deviations there? Testing and product quality evaluation based on original test plan. That is what just now I mentioned. Obviously, the impediments and workarounds will be there here also. Test metrics, unmitigated defects, unmitigated risk and defects that are not visible. So after execution, maybe you have logged some bugs. Okay, some bugs will be fixed then and there. Some bugs will not be fixed or will be taken at a later point. So it will have information about what all bugs are not fixed yet or what all risks are yet unmitigated. Okay, and obviously the lessons learned. You have done with your testing now, right? So what any lessons learned for improvement in the future sprints, that will be included as part of completion report. Okay, now you have all the metrics that you are going to produce, right? So now how are you communicating the status of testing? Can you let me know in your project how after your testing is done, how are you communicating it? After preparing all this summary report or progress report or defect report, how are you communicating this with your test lead or your stakeholder? Yes, how are you producing this?
Through email.
Email. Okay. Any other form other than email? Anyone have any other forms of sending the reports?
Sending as a test report
Yeah, test report. How you send it?
via email only.
Email only. Okay. Anyone here in the team using other than email communication? No. Okay. So other than email communication, maybe most of you are using Teams now. So sometimes we used to communicate this in Teams channel also to our leads. Or either if you are using any agile form, you have burn down chart as someone was mentioning sometime earlier, or we can create dashboards in the tool itself where we can see the status of whatever is being passed, whatever is blocked, like that we can see in dashboard. Or we can store everything in a SharePoint location like an online documentation. Verbally, sometimes we communicate the status of testing with our team members in our daily stand-up calls or something like that. Or you may, as all of you were mentioning, you can email it as a test report also. So these are the various forms of communicating the status of testing. Okay, any doubts in this? Okay, next topic is a very important topic, that is configuration management, and it will be a direct question coming from this area. Okay, anyone knows what is a configuration management or any tools which you have used as part of configuration management? No? Okay, maybe if any automation testers are there in the team, they may have an awareness of about this. So have you heard about tools like SVN, Git, etc.? SVN, Git, or any such kind of tools?
Yes.
Yes, right? So why is it used for? Any idea why we are using Git or SVN? Okay, when you use a Git and SVN, what is the usage here? Is suppose you are working as a team and think like you are automation testers in the team, or this applies to the developers in the team. Okay, many of them may be working individually in their assigned modules, right? Maybe I am working on module 1 of the product, another tester is working on module 2. Okay, suppose thing like after 1 or 2 days, okay, I went on a sick leave or I left the company. Okay. So during that time, the next person maybe think like that was a priority task to be delivered within that sprint. So other person, suppose I have to assign other person, means he has to get the latest code and work on top of that, right? So that is why we have all this configuration management systems like Git, SVN in place, so that every day whenever I am doing some code changes, even in automation scripting, I am doing some scripting work, I have to check in the code using some tool should be there, right? So Git and SVN serves this purpose. I can check in the latest I can check in the latest version of the code, whatever I am doing in my day-to-day activities. So the next person, even though he went on leave, the other person can continue starting from whatever he left off. He can check out the latest code from the master branch and then do the continuous process out. Continuing from there. That's why we have this configuration management system. Another use case, what I can say is, suppose thing like you are done with the release 1 of your product. Okay. Now, after the release is done, you are now working on new items, which is part of your next release. Okay. During that time, just think like you have received a production issue. Okay. Do you remember the module 1 where we learned about debugging and root causing the issue whenever we are receiving an issue? So what will happen when a production issue is received? definitely as testers, we will try to reproduce it. And suppose thing like we are able to reproduce it, and the developer will do the debugging, right? Like to analyze what is the root cause of that defect. So now we are already working on release 2. So from which version of code this issue is being reported? After my release 1 is done to the production, this issue is being reported. So what the developer has to do before actually debugging the issue, he has to check that release version of the code in order to analyze like what is the root cause of that issue. So the release 1 of the code he has to check out and then analyze on top of that. Then only he will be able to root cause the issue, right? So how he can achieve it? Again, we need some kind of tool usage there. That is where this S3N and Git come into play. Okay, whenever you see this configuration management topic, you have to remember this keywords that is given here. That is, configuration management systems are basically used for unique identification, version controlling, tracking the changes, traceability. These keywords you have to remember. So this is what I discussed in my example also, like the traceability of whatever changes have been done from each developer or each automation developer who is working in the team. Each version of code I have to identify, like the production issue came means I have to check out that version of code. So version controlling, traceability, unique identification of each item. What all changes have been done? Who did this change? Who did that change? Because multiple developers will be working on the system, right? So tracking the changes. All identified documentation and software items are referenced unambiguously. It's similar. It is having the similar meaning like unique identification. So these keywords just keep in your mind. It will be direct question asked from this module. So you can see through these keywords and pick up the right option. Okay. So unique identification, version controlling, tracking the changes, maintaining the traceability, identified documentation and software items are referenced unambiguously in test documentation. So the last point is similar to unique identification. Okay. So that is what configuration management. Now we have discussed about defect reports, right? So I hope like you may be using any of the defect management system like Jira or Azure DevOps or HPALM. So these are the various defect management softwares that is available. Can you let me know which defect management system you are using in your project or issue tracking system?
Is Stepper Squad the defect management system?
What is that? Come again?
Stepper Squad.
I'm not getting that. It's not clear for me. Can you repeat?
Stepper Squad.
Stepper Squad. It is like similar to Jira. You are logging the bug in that system.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a
Then
third-party tool inside Jira, I think.
Okay, fine. Okay, then it can be considered as this defect management system. Yeah, it can be considered. Any other tools?
We use Git only for putting issues.
Git is actually your version controlling system.
Yeah, but we create a project inside Git and raise issue in that.
You raise issue in Git?
Yeah.
How? Can you let me know how you are raising
it? There will be a repository for each project, right?
Correct.
Inside that, we create a project for raising issues, and we can create issue like that. We can put label, even severity, priority, anything.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this I'm hearing it first time. No info for me. Okay. Anyway, like repositories are being used, but I have not heard the issues logged in Git. Okay, any other issue tracking mechanism? No one is using Jira here. Anyone using Azure DevOps? Okay, so the most common tool used is Jira in most of the project. Okay, so nowadays some projects are using Azure DevOps also. Okay, and we have different collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams or Google Chat or Slack channels where you can use for communication within the team. So, which means you are using in your project? Teams, Zoom, for meetings and all. What all tools you use? Yes, please. You don't use any Teams, Zoom. How are you conducting meetings within the team? WebEx. Yeah. Any other? Slack. Okay, Teams. Okay. So seems like you are using multiple members are using multiple things. Okay. So now let me know, once you log a defect either in Jira or whatever tools you are using, or maybe you are using it manually also, what all things or what all details you provide while you raise a defect?
Steps to
Please.
reproduce.
Yeah.
Steps to reproduce.
Steps to reproduce. Okay. Quick answers, please.
Screenshot.
Screenshots. Okay.
Expected and actual.
Okay.
Priority, severity.
Okay. Anything else? Title you won't give for the defect?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What else? Do you link your test cases to your defect?
Yes. Link test cases and user story.
User story. Okay. What else? I think you have answered it very, very correctly. So let's see what all things ISTQB says about defect management. Okay. Or what are things you have to include in a defect report. Unique identifier will be there. Like there'll be a defect ID, right? That is what is called as unique identifier. Title with a short summary, which you already mentioned. Date when the anomaly was observed, issuing organization, author, including their role. Okay, if you're using a tool like Jira, this all will be defaultly present in this tool, which you have to fill in. Identification of the test object and test environment. Like maybe if you have multiple environments to test, you will mention in which environment you have found this issue. Context of defect. That means the test cases that this case that has been ran or the activities that you perform, all those information you can provide. Description of failure, including the steps to reproduce, like reproduct steps and any logs or database dumps or screenshots or recordings or whatever things you want to attach with the report that you already mentioned. Expected actual results already mentioned. Severity, priority, already you mentioned. Status of the defect. There'll be a field in Jira where you keep the status, right? Open, closed, referred, like that. References to test cases. That is what I asked. Linking of your defect with your user story or your test case. So these are the things that ISTQB terms defines like what is need to be there in a defect report. Some of them already you'll be having, some you will not be following. But this is the standard that is set from the ISTQB. Okay, any doubts in this? So definitely there will be one question from defect report, but that will not be a direct question most probably. What will they give is they will give a scenario for you and ask you to identify what are we missing in this defect report. Like they will explain a blah 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 scenario like that. They'll show very long story. They will explain like you are going to test a web application. Now you have in that regression testing phase. Now you created a defect like that. They will explain a story for you. Okay, then they'll give the content of that story. Like they'll mention, okay, as part of the defect report, you included, you mentioned like this. Then they'll mention title, some title they will mention. Then they will mention like, this is very critical to the user, which means that they have already defined the priority of that defect. And in the report itself, the steps to actually reproduce is mentioned. Like that, some scenarios they will mention, and they will ask you what is missing in this report. So to understand that, you have to carefully go through all these points which is given in the ISTQB. Okay, then you have to correlate it with the scenario that is given. Maybe in some cases they are missing any one bullet point here. Maybe they have missed any reproductive steps, or they have not attached any logs, or maybe they have not mentioned the expected results. So something will be missing there, which will be tricky. You have to read through that and find out what is missing there. Okay, usually the questions from defect management will be asked like that. Okay. Okay, I skipped one slide here. So what is the objective of defect reports? That is, you already know it. Why we are producing this defect reports? So why we are producing it? Those who are handling this reports, like the developers, they have to know the details about it. So we have to give the sufficient information to them. It's also means of tracking the quality of working product, correct? Like based on the defects that are logged, we are ensuring that the quality of the product is met. Okay, then ideas for improvement. Okay, these are the basic objectives of a defect management. I think that's there. Yeah, that's all for module 5. So recap is not kept. Okay, I'll just quickly go through whatever we discussed today. We started with the main topic of test planning. We went through what is the content and those details. Then we came, let me go to that. Okay, we started with test planning, content. Then we discussed iteration release planning, entry exit criteria, estimation techniques, different estimation techniques we have went through. Test case prioritization, 3 types of prioritization we have discussed: test pyramid, testing quadrants. Then what? Risk management. We discussed about how we analyze, how we control project and product risk. Okay, there was one question which was there, right? What was it? Someone asked a question about risk here. I told like I'll come to that at the end. Some question was there, right?
Positive risk.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Positive and negative risk. So how that positive risk can be having a impact, you asked, right? So for that, like now you know what is actually project risk, what is actually product risk. So suppose thing like example of a positive risk what I can think of is maybe you have requested some additional tools or additional resources. Okay, once you analyzed the did some brainstorming or discussion with the team, you came to know, okay, I need some tools for the additional tools, or I need some more resources, or some training is needed for you to actually start working on this. Okay, which can be a risk there, but a positive risk that can be considered as a positive risk also, because so when you analyzed or when you did the brainstorming, you identified this and you have proactively reported this, so that the necessary arrangements for the tool, the licensing, all those things can be made upfront, which will make your project more efficient. If that is being provided, maybe you can test it manually also, but you have a tool which gives you better results. Okay, you can reduce human efforts there, or you can reduce the risk of human errors there. Maybe you can use it too. So when you report it, actually when you get that tool means it will make your project more efficient in that. So in that aspect, you can consider that as a positive risk. So there are positive risk also, which may have an additional, cost, or suppose you wanted some training and additional licensing, maybe some cost will be incurred with that. But definitely the other part will be, it will have more efficiency in your project compared to if it was not there. So such kind of things we can consider as a positive risk. So here we discussed about risk, then control measures, monitoring and control. We once more iterated the example, the different metrics used, purpose and content of 2 reports we discussed, test progress and test completion. Only these 2 is included in the syllabus. That is why we discussed that. Then different status of communication, configuration management, and defect management. Defect management, the main topic is what is included in a defect report. So with that, we'll discuss about 5 sample questions. Can you try to answer question 1? The direct question. If you don't know the answer also, you can go from the options and try to see whether it fits there. Yes, please, it's a direct question. Can you try to answer? No answer. C, configuration management. Yeah, that is correct. So if you see test plan, it never suits there, right? Have you ever learned like it's to establish, maintain integrity of component system? No, right? Risk and testing, it's not related to anything related to risk. So definitely the answer will be configuration management only. Don't confuse it with none of the above, because configuration management, if you remember some keywords I have mentioned, along with that, it is this point is also mentioned there, like maintaining the integrity. Maintaining integrity, versioning, unique identification, traceability, all these points you have to remember. So at least once you go through that, you will be able to get this. So question 2, example of test control action. Yes, please give the answer. Question 2, example of test control action. Reprioritizing, changing the test schedule, re-evaluating whether test item meets entry and exit criteria. All these are control actions, correct? All these are control actions. You are monitoring something and you are doing a control action. So most of them have answered D. Maria says it's A. If you see the other options, that is also a control action, because seeing the test schedule, unavailability, you are rescheduling it, changing the test schedule, which means again it's a control action only. So option is D, all of the above. Okay, question number 3. Test report prepared during a test activity and test report at the end of the testing activity. Even though you don't know the portion also, you can think it logically and answer it. During and at the end. Yeah, answer is A. During is test progress report, other is test summary report. The second option is given in reverse format. This is not related to defects, so C and D can be ruled out. So the correct option is A. So question 4, tests are prioritized so that you shorten the time required, you do the best testing in the time available, you do more effective testing, you find more faults. Why are we prioritizing the test? Remember the example of regression testing we discussed? Option B is correct. Yeah, that is correct. Because there'll be a time given for you. You have to do the best testing in the time available. That is why you are prioritizing the test. Okay, which tool can be used by an agile team to show the amount of work that has been completed and the amount of total work remaining for a given iteration? This is something related to agile. So see in the options what is coming in relation to the agile. Acceptance criteria, no, because it is something related to, okay, options correctly mentioned. Option D, burn down chart. It is what related to agile. Completion report, no. Defect report, no. Acceptance criteria is given in the PBI. Not anything that gives amount of work. So it directly says it's a burn down chart. Okay, that's it for today. Any other questions, team? Next, you'll be having a mock exam. So before that, any questions you have? You have to prepare 2 days for your mock exam and then come prepared so that you can attend that exam.
Can you suggest some site so that we can
Suggest some
site for this online mock test?
online mock exams are there available in Udemy. You have access to Udemy, you can browse through that and do some mock exams. And the sample questions are there in the ISTQB site itself. Okay, you can download that. Key is also available. You can, after preparing, you try to attempt that and go through the key and you can go through detailed explanation is given, like every option, why it is ruled out, why it is not the correct option for you. Everything is mentioned in detail so that you can go through that options, study in detail, and thereby you can get an idea like, okay, what are the areas will be asked in your exam paper. Just prepare for 2 days, then only you attempt the mock exam. Otherwise, there is no use. After the mock exam, we'll be having the discussion of all the questions in the mock exam. Any other questions? Okay, if no other questions, thanks everyone. Good night. If you have any questions, you can stay back.